The idea today is to present to you in image what I've described in my book, The Market Gardener. And the premise of everything is that you can make a really decent livelihood farming on small acreage. We've been doing this for more than a decade, and we've learned so many things along the way. And if I had known all that we've came up with when I started, I think that that would really kickstart our career. So hopefully we're passing this on to you guys. We're going to talk about the cropping system per se, the first half. And then we'll talk about some management practices, weed prevention, crop planning, and the tools we use. This is all going to go with as the day goes by. I think I'll start my presentation today with just giving you numbers of what we do. So that kind of will give you the scope and the idea of the farm. So my farm is called the Jardin de la Grelinette, which is the Broad Fork farm in French. And we farm on 1.5 acres of permanent raised beds. The CSA share is 140 member. We deliver for 21 weeks, and we also do 2 farmers markets, one on Saturday morning, one on Thursday. The sales of the vegetable produced on site last year was $150,000 of production. So these are the vegetables that we produce on the farm. The labor on the farm has been me and my wife full-time ever since we've started the project in 2004. We've had no outside laborers, and we're hiring 2 full-time staff, 40 hours a week, from March to December. And so there's 4 of us to make the show run. We also have interns on the farm. We have from 2 to 3 that come for a 4-week internship program, but I don't count them as labor on the farm. And the reason is not because they're not good workers, or it's just they're not reliable. And every year I get these long letters of people that have read my book in French. Most of them come from France, and they're computer people, and then they've read that and they're like, oh, they want to change their life, and it's like this big heart opener for them. And then they want to come and intern on the farm, and so we give them a slot. And then when it's time to come, I get a phone call from Jean-Luc that says, I've met this beautiful French-Canadian girl and I'm going biking across Canada. I will not be there, Jean-Martin, tomorrow. And that happens so often, you wouldn't believe it, that we've stopped relying on these people for labor. Because if I'm planning that these guys are working and they're not there, it's more pressure on me to operate. So without them, we can operate, the 4 of us. And actually, we can talk later on about interns or internship programs if you want. But on our farm, the interns, it's something that Maud-Hélène and I, my girlfriend, my wife, in French, in Canada, we say girlfriend, wife, it's the same. It's romantic that way, I think. But it's not a gift, but it's like we want to be communicating what we're doing. So that's why we have interns. So they're more of a distraction, if you want, from production. So they're not equated in the labor force. We have no tractor on the farm, and it'll become clear to you guys why. It's not for philosophical reason or because it's a dogma. It's just because we didn't need one. And our farm got to be successful because we don't have one. People don't believe me, but that's the case I'm going to try to make. The breakout for diesel and fossil fuel is really low. Diesel is because we go to Montreal twice a week. Our delivery truck runs on straight vegetable oil, so if it didn't, that number would be much higher. We have high costs for propane because we're in a northern climate, and our goal is by the 1st of June to have a booth with everything on it. So we plan to have tomatoes by the 1st of June. So we heat a lot the greenhouse. But $260 is what is equated for the gasoline that I put in my walking tractor, which is all of the fossil fuel input for soil working on the farm, which is really not a lot. Like I'm doing my accounting these days, and just my parking tickets in Montreal, it's 5 times that amount of money. And most importantly, the number that is important in all of this, this is interesting because it illustrates that we can have, on small acreage, we can have a lot of production and we can have, full employment with not a lot of fossil fuel consumption. But what's really important, and why this farming model, I think, is relative and why I'm invested in passing it along and teaching about it, is the profit margin. On our farm, ever since we've started the farm in 2005, was our first year of operation, our profits have been around 45%. Meaning that at the end of the year, when we've paid all of our expenditures, the salaries to our employees, seeds, mortgage, whatever, almost half of the production, the income from the production, comes back to Maud-Hélène and I as our salary, which, we're not, day traders at Wall Street, but we're making enough money to have a very comfortable livelihood. Okay? So that's what we're doing in numbers. And I don't know if some of you guys are familiar with numbers, with farming numbers. If you have a farm or if you know about farming operations, you could have a sense of what this is, if this is good or not. But if you don't, this is really good. Okay? These are really great numbers for farming, especially the 45% margin. And then the question is, well, how do we do this? How do we get this going in a northern climate? Because people were fend away today because of the snowstorm, but how in Fahrenheit, how much was it at my farm this morning? Negative 20 was this morning on my farm, okay? Just to give you an idea. So I'm not saying this is super good just to brag. I'm saying, okay, so then the question is, how do we do this? And that's what the workshop today is about. Making sure that you guys understand the key elements, the key factors that allow us to make this happen. And hopefully to make it happen for you guys, okay? So I'm going to start off by taking about, half an hour to tell you a bit about my story and how our farm came to be, because I think it's important that you guys understand how this system evolved, because we haven't started with these numbers. I knew nothing about farming when I started. I graduated from McGill University. I had studied environmental science, ecology. Basically, I took a 3-year courses in environmental disasters. And I was really bummed when I finished because I had, I just learned how, there's an ecological collapse happening everywhere. And I felt invested in trying to be part of the solution. And we were looking both, that's where I met my wife, we were looking for answers about how to be a positive factor of change, but to be doing something physically. And we did a trip. We went to Mexico. We worked on coffee bean farms. We worked on fair trade farms. And then we went to New Mexico. And we started to woof on a small organic farm. And that's where we met Richard Bélanger, who was a French-Canadian guy that was farming there around Santa Fe. And that was a great gift for us to meet this guy, because he was our first impression of what farming was. Because again, I didn't come from a rural background. And back in the early 2000s, at least where I was living, organic wasn't what it is now, and the local food movement wasn't as developed. So I really knew nothing about farming. But here was this guy, Richard, farming in beautiful Abiquiu, like beautiful area, beautiful light, working all day, growing stuff, preparing his things, making it really neat to go to market on Saturdays. And then we would wake up early, go to market, and then there was people lining up. Like these were like 20 people lineups to buy Richard's salad, because he was the salad king over there. He was one of the better growers. And people were thanking him for his work. Hey, Richard, thanking him. And I was doing the cash register, and I was looking at the money he was making. I was like, man, these guys, he's making $3,000 in half a day's work, and I would make $3,000 in the whole summer. And so I was like, whoa, this is cool. And then Richard would take his winters to go to Mexico and hang out. And I was like, whoa, that's a pretty sweet setup. And that got me interested in this lifestyle of farming. And so that was the start of it. Then we were asked by another funny turn of event to work as farm managers on another small farm, which we did in New Mexico, stayed there for 1.5 years. And after 2 years of farming really, really small scales, we were farming on less than acres, we came back to Quebec because that's where our roots are from, and we started our own little operation. And we had a grower that was doing CSA. He had like 30 members, and he quit. And so we took his clients, and we started our own little program. We didn't have a place to live. We didn't know where we wanted to go, so we just figured, trying to find a cool community, which we did. And then we asked people if we could just set up a summer camp on their place. And we had a couple of French people that had like a B&B kind of farm to table thing, and we just bluntly went and said, would you guys be interested in having us live on your farm? And they said yes. And then so we set up a summer camp, and we lived there for 2 years. And I had seen a young couple with kids in New Mexico put up a teepee and live in a teepee, and I thought, wow, that's cool. So we did that in Quebec, but there was something that was lost in translation, because this, you're better off with a yurt or whatever, but not a teepee, because you're losing all the heat and the water gets in. Those 2 years, we did a lot of mistakes, and that was another blessing in disguise, because when you make these mistakes, then the next time around, you don't do them again. An example, the teepee was like pretty bad in itself. But, that was a Norton slope, really big slope, clay, heavy clay, but the site had an amazing view of Pinnacle Mountain. And back then we were like, well, this is what you want, When you're working outside, when you're working the fields, when you're doing things ecologically, you want to stop and contemplate and be in bliss, because it's a nice, environment. And so we thought that. So that was a key factor for taking on this site. But if you want to be a successful small-scale farmer, you should perhaps not stop and just work and have a beer at 5:30, and you can drive up to the, whatever. And so we didn't know about that, but we learned a lot. And I encourage everyone that wants to get into farming to start on rented land and make your mistakes there before buying. So that's what we set it up. And one great part of that time is that we were doing it. We were doing it, really right on. We had 30 members the first year. We had 50 the next year. We started a small farmers market too, and already we were making like 6, 7, 8 grand of profit at the end of the season, because we had no expenditures. All the tools were super simple hand tools that we bought from Johnny's, and we were farming with rakes and an old rototiller, and we had put up a teepee, and it was good enough. The only drawback was winters, and even there we took our winters and went traveling down south. And one of the first trips that we made was to go to Cuba. And that for us, as I look backward now of what came about in our cropping system, was a very important moment, because it was the first time we were seeing farming without tractors in a large-scale perspective. And that didn't happen by chance, because we had studied at McGill, when we were at the university there, the Cuban experiment, which lasted about 12 years and really was kickstart when the Soviet Union fell apart. These guys lost all of their fossil fuel input on the island. So all of the fuel for the tractors, or even if they had a little bit of fuels, when the tractors would break, they didn't have any parts to repair them. And all of the synthetic fertilizers, fungicides, herbicides, pesticides, these are all petroleum-based products. So they had none of that. So they had to basically reinvent their whole agriculture for it to be 100% organic. So with regards to vegetable production, what they came up with was these permanent raised beds of cement slab contoured, beds called organoponicos. And in these beds, you had densely seeded or transplanted crops. And you would see acres and acres and acres and acres of these organoponicos. And the growers, they were gardening with hand. They were gardeners. They were farming with hand tools. And we were looking at this, around La Habana or in the countryside. It was always the same setup. And we're like, geez, man, this is a lot of production per square foot. And that was like something that got us thinking about kind of like trying to build up that kind of model. The next winter, we made another trip. And this time we went to southern France. We went there because at that time, this was already my 4th growing season. And I was reading a lot of the books coming out of California about bio-intensive growing. John Jevons, high-yield gardening, square-foot gardening, all of these books. And it would always refer to the French intensive techniques. And so I'm Francophone. And so I thought, I'm just going to fly there and check it out for myself and pick up all the best tricks. And what I found was that every time I would ask people about bio-intensive, they would go, what? What is that? That didn't compute at all for them. And then when we would describe these patterns of, densely seeded area, they would bring us to these kind of operations, which was, super productive, but monoculture kind of type, glasses house that costed millions and millions of dollars. And basically we toured part of France looking for, acre farms that were really doing it. And we didn't find any. Not to say that they weren't any, but we didn't find any. We learned a lot from these growers because even the conventional growers, they have a lot of things to teach. And so we learned about spacings, we learned about quality, we learned about different cultivars, varieties, because in France it's just crazy how they're really into it for the taste and the quality of the produce. So that was inspirational for us. We also learned a lot from working the soil really gently. Because these guys, it's not like over here, they don't have space. So if they've been farming for 30 years or 40 years and they've messed up their soil, they just can't go to the next one because there's a parking lot or there's another farm or there's something. Europe is like condensed. There's a lot of people there. And so they've figured out through time how to work their soil to get their operations done, but to be really gentile with their soil, to conserve the organic matter over 45 or 50 weeks growing season. So we learned a lot about that. So coming back more to our story, an event kind of propelled us to something new, which was the farm where we were working got sold, and then we had to move again. And we decided it was time for us to buy a farm because we had already one kid and we wanted to get our roots established in that community. And land was super expensive where we are. All these day traders, lawyers, bankers, they have second homes. We're an hour south of Montreal in the eastern townships. No mosquitoes, no fly, good climate, whatever. A lot of vineyards. But we found that 10-acre site, which was 7-acre woodlot, 3-acre prairie, in the middle of which had a rabbit coop. A rabbit coop is a building where you raise rabbits for meat. And that was a 40 by 100 building that was empty, had been abandoned for like 8 years. And the asking price was really reasonable because there was a zoning regulation there that if you weren't a farmer, you couldn't build a house on it. And if you were a farmer, what are you going to do with 2 acres of prairie except park your machinery on that? So nobody would buy it. But we thought, this is perfect. We'll build a house inside that. It'll be much better than the teepee, which was molding all over the place. We're getting sick about that. And then we thought, if all of this is planted, it's going to be a lot. And our goal when we started the farm, when we bought it in 2004, was to have 2 salaries derived from our farming operation and having this generate enough income also to pay for the mortgage of the house that we wanted to build inside the rabbit coop. So we had a pretty clear mission statement from start. Then we went to different loan offices to get loans, to get you know, to have a mortgage and to get equipment. And we had a really sweet business plan, really well made, had done our homeworks, and everything was super fine with everyone that we went, because we visited, I think, 4 or 5 before somebody said yes. Everybody was like compelled. It was like, oh, the charts are nice, you put colors, you printed in colors, it was all good. And then they would really go through it and say, whoa, you're farming in 1.5 acres. And then they said, okay, that's not serious, we're not interested. Because nobody knew about small scale farm or micro scale farming the way we wanted to do it. And so I think what happened to us is that one of the bankers, they really didn't read it out. They looked at the colors. And that was good enough for them, and they said yes, so we finally end up starting our project that way. So all of this to say that that's been our reality ever since on the farm, i.e. we've had about 2.5 acre prairies to establish a market garden that had to be quite productive. And yeah. So we, you know, first winter, we bought in the fall. First winter, started to play there. It was great. We were building our house, and again, you know, it's just like this for us, like, was way better than the teepee. Like, I still remember, you know, I would step outside, and just when it would rain, when it would pour, and I was like, wow, man, the water is not coming in the house. And I was like, these guys know how to make buildings. And I was really impressed, you know. And so now it's a nice house. You know, after 2 years, two winters of building and unbuilding, because I would do it myself, and then I had time, so I would build it, and then I would, you know, my father-in-law would come and say, J.M., no, that's not how you do that. And then I would tear it up, and then I would do it again. So I did the house twice, but now it's a fine house, and I'm showing this to say, because, you know, these old buildings, these tobacco farms or whatever, they're out there, and why not give them a second chance? If they're rightly built, and if, you know, their roof structure is nice, man, they can go another 50 years, no problem.